8-year-old girl claims to be Janina Lewandowska and shares astonishing accounts of the Katyn Massacre. The colored pencil snapped in Kasia Nowak's small hand as she pressed it against the paper with unusual force. Her third-grade teacher, Ms. Jablonska, paused beside the girl's desk, concerned by the intensity with which the normally cheerful 8-year-old was drawing. On the page was not the spring landscape the class had been assigned, but a detailed sketch of bodies lying in a forested clearing, rendered with disturbing precision. "Kasia, what are you drawing?" the teacher asked gently. The girl looked up, her eyes momentarily unfocused, as if returning from somewhere distant. "The forest. Where they took us," she replied, her voice oddly flat. "Before they shot us in the back of the head." 2 days earlier, Kasia's class had visited the Katyn Museum in Warsaw as part of their history curriculum. The teacher had carefully managed the students' exposure to the difficult subject matter. The 1940 massacre of thousands of Polish officers and intellectuals by Soviet forces, focusing primarily on the importance of remembrance rather than the graphic details. Yet something about the experience had deeply affected Kasia. That evening, in the modest apartment on the outskirts of Warsaw, where the Nowak family lived, Maria Nowak listened with growing concern as her husband described their daughter's behavior at school. "The teacher says she's been withdrawn since the museum visit," Jan explained. "And now these drawings? It's not like her." Maria sighed, setting aside the stack of essays she'd been grading. As a high school history teacher, she was accustomed to addressing difficult historical subjects with students, but explaining such tragedies to her own child felt different. Perhaps it was too much for an 8-year-old, she conceded, though the museum is quite careful with school groups. Their conversation halted as they heard a strange sound from Kasia's bedroom, a low, rhythmic humming. Pushing open the door, they found their daughter sitting cross-legged on her bed, eyes closed, swaying slightly as she hummed what seemed to be a military march. "Kasia," Maria called softly. The girl's eyes opened, but the expression in them was somehow different, older, more focused. "Jestem podporucznik Janina Lewandowska, Eskadra Poznańska," she stated in a formal tone that sounded nothing like a child's voice. "I am Second Lieutenant Janina Lewandowska, Poznań Air Squadron." Jan and Maria exchanged alarmed glances. While Kasia was learning about Poland's history in school, she had never shown particular interest in military matters or aviation history. More concerning was the specific reference to Janina Lewandowska, the only known female victim of the Katyn Massacre, a fact that had not been emphasized during the school tour. "Kochani, where did you learn about Lieutenant Lewandowska?" Maria asked carefully. Kasia blinked, momentarily confused. I don't know. Was I talking about her?" This pattern continued over the following week. Kasia would suddenly speak about flight maneuvers, radio operations, or life in the officers' prison camp at Kozelsk with a vocabulary and understanding far beyond her years, only to return to her normal self minutes later with no recollection of what she had said. After she began waking up screaming every night, clutching the back of her neck, her parents sought professional help. Dr. Agnieszka Kowalska, a child psychologist specializing in trauma, welcomed Kasia into her office with a warm smile. The room was designed to put children at ease, with soft colors and comfortable seating. "I understand you've been having some troubling dreams, Kasia," she began gently. The girl nodded, fidgeting with the sleeve of her sweater. "I dream about the forest, and the hole in the ground, and the men with the guns." "Can you tell me more about these dreams?" Kasia took a deep breath, and as she began to speak, That unsettling transformation occurred again. Her posture straightened, her mannerisms shifted, and her voice took on a cadence and maturity that belied her years. They came for us at night. They told us we were being transferred to another camp, but something felt wrong. They bound our hands and loaded us onto trucks. I remember the smell of the canvas cover, damp and moldy. The roads were rough. Some of the men prayed quietly. Dr. Kowalska, though startled by the change, maintained her professional composure. Who are they, Kasia? The NKVD officers. Captain Blokin supervised the executions personally. He wore a leather apron and gloves to keep the blood off his uniform. The detail sent a chill through the psychologist. While Vasily Blokin was known to historians as the chief executioner at Katyn, his attire during the killings was not the kind of information included in school museum tours or general historical education. How do you know these things, Kasia? The girl's eyes met hers with unsettling directness. Because I was there. I was Janina Lewandowska, pilot, daughter of General Józef Daubor-Mushnitsky, the only woman at Kozelsk who went to the forest. Over the next hour, Dr. Kowalska documented as Kasia, or whoever she believed herself to be in these moments, spoke in vivid detail about Janina Lewandowska's life. She described learning to fly gliders as a teenager, her marriage to instructor Mieczysław Lewandowski, her service in the Polish Air Force, and her capture by Soviet forces in 1939. Most disturbingly, she recounted the final moments in the forest of Katyn with a precision that seemed impossible for an 8-year-old to invent or learn from historical accounts. They walked us one by one, from the truck to the edge of the pit. I could hear the shots before my turn came. When they led me forward, I saw the bodies already piled below. I began to recite the prayer for the dying. The officer behind me placed his pistol at the base of my skull. I heard the click of the safety being released. Here, Kasia stopped, her small hand moving instinctively to the back of her neck. What happened next, Kasia? Gidani, Kowalska asked, her voice barely audible. Nothing. Just darkness. Then I was born again, in this life. But the memories stayed with me, buried until I saw her photograph in the museum. Then everything started coming back. After the session, Dr. Kowalska met with Kasia's parents to discuss what she had witnessed. She chose her words carefully, balancing professional skepticism with the undeniable strangeness of what she had observed. I've worked with children for 15 years, and I've never seen anything quite like this, she admitted. The level of historical detail Kasia demonstrated goes far beyond what she could have been exposed to through normal education or media. Are you suggesting she's somehow channeling the spirit of this woman? Jan asked incredulously. The Nowaks were nominally Catholic, but not particularly religious. I'm not suggesting anything supernatural, Dr. Kowalska clarified. There are documented cases of children exhibiting knowledge they couldn't have acquired through normal means. Some researchers call it cryptomnesia, forgotten memories resurfacing. Others have more unconventional explanations, like reincarnation. Maria's academic training made her inherently skeptical, but she couldn't dismiss what was happening with her daughter. I'm simply saying that whatever is happening with Kasia, the historical accuracy of her statements is difficult to explain through conventional psychological models. Many of the details she shared about Janina Lewandowska's life and the conditions at Kozelsk are documented in historical records, but they're not the kind of information an 8-year-old would have access to. So what do we do? Jan asked, the concern evident in his voice. For now, I recommend we continue with regular sessions. I'd also like to consult with a colleague who specializes in historical trauma. With your permission, I'd like to record our next session." That night, Maria stayed up late researching Janina Lewandowska. Born in 1908 to a prominent military family, she had indeed been a pioneering aviator, one of the first women in Poland to earn a pilot's license. After being captured by Soviet forces in 1939, she was held at the Kozelsk camp and ultimately executed alongside thousands of Polish officers in the forest of Katyn in April 1940. Her remains were among those identified during the German exhumation of the mass graves in 1943. What troubled Maria most was how closely Kasia's accounts aligned with historical records, and in some cases, included details that weren't widely published. She had described the layout of the Kozelsk camp with remarkable accuracy, named specific NKVD officers who had been present, and even recounted conversations among prisoners that had never been documented. As she closed her laptop, Maria heard a sound from Kasia's bedroom. She found her daughter sitting upright in bed, eyes open but seemingly unaware of her surroundings. "They didn't find all of us," Kasia said in that unnervingly adult voice. "And they didn't find what we hid?" "What do you mean, Kochani?" Maria asked, sitting carefully on the edge of the bed. "Before they took us to the forest, we knew what might happen. Some of us wrote final letters, made records of what we had witnessed in the camps. We hid them, hoping someone would find them someday, would tell our stories." "Where did you hide these things, Kasia?" The girl's hand moved as if drawing a map in the air. "There's a clearing, northwest of the main burial site. A lightning-struck pine marks the spot. We dug a hole during exercise periods, a little at a time. Lined it with a metal ammunition box one of the officers stole from the supply shed. Everything was sealed inside. Letters, journals, photographs, identification papers, proof of who we were, of what they did to us. And no one ever found this box?" Kasia shook her head slowly. "It's still there, waiting. That's why I remember, to show where to look." The following morning, Jan contacted an old university friend who now worked at the Institute of National Remembrance, the government organization responsible for investigating historical crimes against the Polish nation. He explained the situation, feeling slightly foolish but desperate for answers. To his surprise, his friend took the matter seriously. "The Katyn case has never been fully resolved," he explained. "Despite what we know about the massacre, many documents remain sealed in Russian archives, and there have always been rumors of personal effects and documents that were never recovered during the exhumations." Within days, the Nowaks found themselves meeting with Professor Andrzej Wolski, a leading historian specializing in the Katyn Massacre. After reviewing Dr. Kowalska's notes and speaking with Kasia directly, the professor's initial skepticism gave way to cautious interest. "Much of what she describes aligns with established historical records," he acknowledged. "But some details, particularly about the NKVD's internal procedures and the final moments before the executions, have never been confirmed in any documentation I've studied." "Could she have learned these things from books or documentaries?" Maria asked. Professor Wolski shook his head. "Some of these details aren't available in any public source. They exist only in classified archives or in testimonies that were lost to history when witnesses died." As they spoke, Kasia sat quietly drawing at a small table nearby. When she finished, she brought her picture to the professor. It was a detailed map, showing what appeared to be a wooded area with various landmarks meticulously noted. "This is where you need to look," she said simply. "I promised the others I would remember." The morning was crisp and bright as an unusual expedition assembled at the edge of the Katyn Forest Memorial Complex. Professor Wolski had secured special permission for a limited archaeological survey, citing new historical evidence that might lead to the recovery of previously undiscovered artifacts. The small team included 2 archaeologists from Warsaw University, a forensic specialist, representatives from the Institute of National Remembrance, and, most unusually, the Nowak family. Kasia walked between her parents, unusually solemn in her blue coat and woolen hat. She had been quiet during the journey from Warsaw, staring out the car window at the Polish countryside with an expression that seemed too contemplative for a child her age. "Are you sure about this?" Maria whispered to her husband as they followed Professor Wolski into the forest. "It seems wrong to involve her in something so macabre." "We discussed this," Jan replied softly. "Dr. Kowalska believes it might actually help her process whatever is happening. And if nothing is found, perhaps it will help dispel these visions." The professor consulted the map Kasia had drawn, comparing it with official surveys of the area. The location she had indicated was indeed northwest of the known burial sites, in a section of forest that had been only cursorily examined during previous investigations. "This way," he instructed, leading the group along a narrow path through tall pines. After 20 minutes of walking, they reached a small clearing. Kasia immediately broke away from her parents, walking with purpose toward a massive old pine tree that had clearly been struck by lightning years earlier, its upper trunk split and blackened. "Here," she said with quiet certainty, standing at a spot approximately 3 meters from the tree's base. "We buried it here, underneath this stone." She pointed to a flat rock that would have been unremarkable to most observers. The archaeologists exchanged skeptical glances, but began setting up their equipment. Using ground-penetrating radar, they first surveyed the area to confirm it was safe to excavate and to look for any anomalies beneath the surface. The lead archaeologist, Dr. Marek Jankowski, frowned at his screen. "There's definitely something here," he confirmed reluctantly. "A rectangular object, approximately 60 centimeters long, 30 wide. Metal, from the signal reflection. About 1 meter beneath the surface." The actual excavation proceeded methodically, with careful documentation of each layer of soil. Kasia watched with intense focus, occasionally providing commentary that continued to unsettle the adults. Lieutenant Kwiatkowski suggested using the ammunition box, she explained at one point. "He said the rubber seal would keep the water out. We worked on digging the hole for 3 weeks, a little each day during exercise periods when the guards weren't watching closely." After nearly 2 hours of careful digging, Dr. Jankowski's brush struck something solid. The assembled group fell silent as he cleared away the remaining soil to reveal the tarnished metal lid of what was indeed a military ammunition container. "My God," Professor Wolski breathed. She was right. Using specialized tools, the archaeologists carefully extracted the box from its resting place, documenting every step with photographs and notes. Soil samples were taken from around the container, and the box itself was placed in a sterile evidence container for transport. "What's inside?" Kasia asked, standing on tiptoe to see over the edge of the excavation. "We can't open it here," Professor Wolski explained gently. "It needs to be examined in a controlled environment to preserve whatever might be inside." The girl nodded with a seriousness that seemed to reflect understanding beyond her years. "The papers might be fragile after all this time." Lieutenant Korchak used his waterproof map case to protect the most important documents. The discovery sent immediate ripples through historical and diplomatic circles. The sealed container was transported to a specialized laboratory in Warsaw. where it was carefully opened in the presence of experts from the Institute of National Remembrance, Gators, international observers, and representatives from both Polish and Russian governments. Inside, preserved remarkably well in the waterproof container, lay exactly what Kasia had described: letters, journals, identification papers, and photographs belonging to Polish officers imprisoned at Kozelsk before their execution. Most significant was a journal bearing the name Janina Lewandowska, containing detailed accounts of daily life in the camp and growing suspicions about the prisoners. Fate. One particularly poignant entry, dated April 20th, 1940, just days before her execution, read, "They are taking groups of 60-70 men each day. They say it is for transport to another camp. But none return, and no word comes from them after. The Russian guards avoid our eyes now. Yesterday, I gave my gold watch to Major Brunicky to hold for me until we meet at the new camp. The look in his eyes told me he does not expect that meeting to occur. If my suspicions are correct, and this journal somehow survives, let it be known that we faced our fate with the dignity befitting Polish officers." For the Nowak family, the whirlwind that followed the discovery proved overwhelming. News outlets from around the world sought interviews. Historical societies and religious organizations reached out with theories about Kasia's inexplicable knowledge. The Russian government initially attempted to dismiss the findings as fabricated, but the authentication of the documents by international experts silenced such claims. Throughout it all, Kasia's episodes continued, though they began to take on a different quality. Rather than the abrupt shifts in personality that had characterized her earlier experiences, she now seemed to move more fluidly between her own consciousness and the memories of Janina. During one particularly significant session with Dr. Kowalska, Kasia explained this evolution in her own childlike terms. "At first, it was like Janina was taking over," she said, drawing idly on a sketch pad. "But now it's more like we're sharing, like we're friends telling each other stories." "Is that less frightening for you?" the psychologist asked. Kasia nodded. "The scary parts are still scary, but they don't feel like they're happening to me anymore. They're more like very strong memories. And why do you think Janina chose to share her memories with you?" The girl considered this thoughtfully. She needed someone to find the box, to tell her story, but also all the others' stories too, so people would know the truth. And now that the box has been found, "There's more," Kasia replied, her pencil moving deliberately across the paper as she sketched what appeared to be a building. "This is where Janina lived in Poznan before the war. In the attic bedroom, there's another hiding place, behind the loose brick in the chimney. She kept her real pilot's diary there, the one with all her flight records and personal thoughts. Her father didn't approve of her flying, so she kept it secret." This new revelation led to another careful investigation. The Lewandowski family home in Poznan had long since passed to new owners, but with their permission, a discreet search was conducted. Behind a loose brick in the attic bedroom's decorative chimney breast, exactly as Kasia had described, investigators discovered a small oilcloth package containing a worn leather diary filled with meticulous flight records, personal reflections, and photographs of a young Janina in her flying gear. The diary provided unprecedented insight into the life of this pioneering female aviator. It contained technical notes about aircraft she had piloted, details of her training regimen, and poignant reflections on the challenges she faced as a woman in the male-dominated field of military aviation in the 1930s. Most moving were the final entries from August 1939, as war loomed on the horizon. "Father believes women should be kept from combat. but I have trained as hard as any man. Poland will need every pilot in the coming conflict. I pray my skills will serve my country well in its hour of need. Whatever comes, I face it without fear, knowing I have lived true to my own spirit, on earth and in the sky. For Janina's living relatives, distant cousins of the Lewandowski family, these discoveries brought both pain and a sense of completion to a family history long overshadowed by tragedy. Helena Lewandowska-Kowalczyk, a grandniece of Janina's husband, visited the Nowaks at their home in Warsaw. The elderly woman approached Kasia with a mixture of wonder and apprehension. "May I ask her a question?" she requested of Kasia's parents. Something only Janina would know? With their permission, she knelt before Kasia and spoke gently. "My grandmother told me that Janina received a special gift from her flying instructor on the day she earned her license. Can you tell me what it was?" Kasia's expression shifted subtly, becoming more focused. A silver compass with an inscription inside. "To navigate the skies and life with equal courage." I carried it with me always. It should have been in my pocket when they found my remains, but it wasn't listed among the personal effects. Helena's hand flew to her mouth. "That's correct. The compass has never been found, and the inscription was never recorded in any document. My grandmother only told me about it before she died." As autumn turned to winter, the international attention began to wane. Though historians and researchers continued to analyze the documents recovered from both Katyn and Poznan, the findings had forced a re-evaluation of several aspects of the Katyn massacre, particularly regarding the treatment of prisoners in the months before the executions and the presence of NKVD officials who had expressed reservations about the killings, details mentioned in multiple journals found in the ammunition box. For Kasia, the experiences gradually became less intense. She still occasionally shared insights or memories that seemed to come from Janina, but the dramatic personality shifts ceased entirely. Dr. Kowalska noted in her records that this evolution suggested a form of psychological integration, as if the purpose of the memories, to recover the hidden truths, was being fulfilled. In January, the Nowak family received an unexpected invitation from the Polish Air Force. In recognition of Janina Lewandowska's service and the new light shed on her story, they were establishing a scholarship for young women interested in aviation. They asked if Kasia would like to attend the ceremony and perhaps take an orientation flight in a training aircraft. Jan and Maria were hesitant, but Kasia's enthusiasm was unmistakable. "She would want me to fly," the girl insisted, "to feel what she felt." On a clear winter morning, with special permission and under careful supervision, Kasia experienced her first flight in a small training aircraft. As the plane lifted from the runway, the pilot, a female Air Force captain, glanced at her small passenger and was struck by the expression of pure joy and recognition on the child's face. "It feels like coming home," Kasia whispered, her eyes fixed on the horizon as Poland spread beneath them in a patchwork of snow-covered fields and forests. That evening, as Maria tucked her daughter into bed, she asked the question that had been on her mind throughout the extraordinary day. "When you were up there, flying, was it you who felt so happy? Or Janina?" Kasia considered this thoughtfully. "Both of us, I think. But mostly me. I think Janina is starting to fade now, like she's done what she needed to do." "And how does that make you feel?" "A little sad, but mostly okay. She gets to be remembered now. And I get to be just Kasia again." Maria brushed the hair from her daughter's forehead, marveling at the resilience of children. "And perhaps at the mysterious connections that sometimes seem to transcend the boundaries of time and understanding. "Mama?" Kasia asked, already drifting toward sleep. "Do you think someday I could be a pilot too, if that's what you want, Kocheni?" Maria replied softly. "The sky is open to everyone now. That's something Janina helped make possible." Spring brought new life to Warsaw as the last traces of winter melted away. For the Nowak family, it also marked a gradual return to normalcy after months of extraordinary events. Kasia had resumed her regular school routine, though her teachers noted she now showed a remarkable aptitude for history and an uncanny interest in aviation. The Morning Post brought an official-looking envelope addressed to the Nowaks. Inside was an invitation from the director of the Katyn Museum for a special ceremony to unveil a new exhibition centered around the artifacts recovered from the forest and the Lewandowski home. "Do you want to attend, Kochani?" Maria asked her daughter over breakfast. "You don't have to if it feels too difficult." Kasia considered this, stirring her hot chocolate thoughtfully. "I think we should go. It's important to remember." Jan exchanged a glance with his wife. These moments of mature reflection had become typical of their daughter, though they now emerged as natural parts of her personality rather than the abrupt shifts they had once witnessed. The museum had been renovated to accommodate the new exhibition. A dedicated gallery housed the preserved documents and personal effects, carefully displayed alongside photographs and biographical information about the officers to whom they had belonged. At the center stood a glass case containing Janina Lewandowska's pilot diary and a recreation of the silver compass she had carried, based on descriptions provided by Kasia. Professor Wolski greeted them warmly. Over the months of working together, he had become something of a family friend. "How are you feeling today, Kasia?" he asked gently. "Better," she replied with a small smile. "The dreams don't come as often now." The professor nodded, understanding the significance of this simple statement. As the documents had been studied and the stories they contained brought to light, Kasia's episodes had gradually diminished in both frequency and intensity. It was as if each revelation had lifted some of the weight of memory from her young shoulders. The ceremony was dignified and solemn. Representatives from the Polish government spoke about the importance of historical truth and remembrance. A Russian historian, Dr. Mikhail Petrov, addressed the audience with an unprecedented statement acknowledging the full extent of Soviet responsibility for the massacre. A diplomatic breakthrough facilitated by the irrefutable evidence found in the hidden documents. When it came time for the formal ribbon cutting, the museum director surprised everyone by inviting Kasia to join him. "This young lady helped bring these stories back into the light," he explained to the assembled guests. "It seems fitting she should help us open this place of memory." As Kasia stepped forward, a hush fell over the crowd. Those who knew her story watched with a mixture of wonder and respect as the small girl in her best blue dress solemnly cut the ribbon, officially opening the exhibition. Afterward, as visitors moved through the gallery, an elderly man approached the Nowak family. He walked with difficulty, leaning heavily on a cane, his eyes rheumy with age but sharp with intelligence. "My name is Alexander Tomczyk," he introduced himself. "I was a child in 1943 when the Germans first excavated the Katyn graves." John shook the man's offered hand. "You were present at the exhumation." The old man nodded. "My father was a doctor. The Germans brought him to examine some of the bodies. I wasn't supposed to be there, but I was a curious boy. I saw things no child should see." He turned his gaze to Kasia, who was listening with solemn attention. "May I ask your daughter something?" he requested. With the Nowak's permission, he addressed Kasia directly. "Young lady, in your Memories. Do you recall a Soviet officer who was different from the others? One who tried to help the Polish prisoners? Kasia's expression became thoughtful, her gaze turning inward as she accessed those now distant impressions. So to are into it. Captain Sokolov, she said after a moment. He slipped extra bread to the sick prisoners. He warned some officers the night before they were taken away. He was transferred suddenly in early April. The other guards said he asked too many questions. The old man's eyes widened. That's the name. My father found a note in the pocket of one of the exhumed officers. It mentioned this Captain Sokolov, saying he had tried to alert them to their fate. The Germans confiscated it immediately. I never saw it documented anywhere. This encounter, like so many others over the past months, added another piece to the historical puzzle. Researchers had indeed found references to a Captain Viktor Sokolov in several of the recovered journals, suggesting that even within the brutal NKVD apparatus, there had been individuals who questioned the massacre, many of whom were subsequently purged themselves. As the day progressed, Kasia grew tired. The emotional weight of the ceremony and the constant attention had taken their toll. John found a quiet bench in the museum garden where she could rest while Maria spoke with some of the historians. "Papa," Kasia said, as they sat watching butterflies flit among early spring flowers, "I think I'm ready to visit the forest now." Jan looked at his daughter with surprise. They had carefully avoided taking Kasia to the actual execution site, fearing it would be too traumatic. "Are you sure, Kochani?" She nodded, her expression serene. "I need to say goodbye properly." 2 days later, the Nowaks stood in the hushed stillness of the Katyn Forest. Spring had touched even this solemn place, with fresh green growth emerging from soil that had once received so much blood. They walked quietly along the memorial path, past the stations marking mass graves and commemorating the thousands who had died there. Kasia moved with certainty to a specific location, a small clearing where a simple stone cross stood. She knelt before it, her small hand reaching out to touch the engraved date, 1940. "This is where it happened," she said softly, "where Janina's journey ended." From her pocket, she withdrew a small item, a tiny wooden airplane she had carved herself under the guidance of her art teacher. "I made this for her," she explained, placing it carefully at the base of the cross, "so she can keep flying, even though they tried to keep her grounded." As Kasia bowed her head in a moment of silent prayer, Maria noticed something extraordinary. A shaft of sunlight broke through the forest canopy, illuminating the spot where her daughter knelt. Around her, white butterflies had appeared, seemingly from nowhere, fluttering in the golden light. Later, when asked about that moment, Maria would describe it as feeling like a transition, as if something had been released or completed. For Kasia, it marked a more tangible change. That night, for the first time in many months, she slept without dreams of the past, waking refreshed and fully present in her own life. Over the following weeks, the episodes ceased entirely. When Dr. Kowalska asked about Janina during their final session, Kasia responded with the simple clarity of childhood. "I think she's at peace now. Her story is being told. The truth is out. She doesn't need me to remember for her anymore." "And how do you feel about that?" the psychologist inquired. Kasia considered this. A little sad, like saying goodbye to a friend, but also happy, because I can just be me now, and I know what I want to be when I grow up. "What's that?" "A pilot," Kasia replied with certainty. "But not in wartime. I want to fly rescue helicopters and help people." 3 years later, Professor Wolski published a comprehensive book about the Katyn Massacre. incorporating the new evidence that had emerged from the recovered documents. In his acknowledgments, he included a special note to Kasia Nowak, whose extraordinary connection to the past helped bring long-buried truths to light. Some mysteries of human consciousness may never be fully explained, but the historical record is now more complete because of her unique role in this discovery. By then, Kasia had indeed begun flight lessons, not in military aircraft, but in a civilian glider program for gifted children. Her instructor often remarked on her natural aptitude, as if she had been born with an instinctive understanding of the principles of flight. On her 11th birthday, a package arrived from the Polish Air Force Museum. Inside was a replica of a woman's flight pin from the 1930s, along with a note in honor of Second Lieutenant Janina Lewandowska, whose story continues to inspire future generations of female aviators. Granatranit, may your own wings carry you far. Kasia wore the pin proudly, though by then she spoke of Janina in the third person, as a historical figure whose story she happened to know well rather than as an identity she had once shared. The memories that had once been so vivid had faded to impressions, then to knowledge, and finally to a story she had heard, or perhaps, in some inexplicable way, helped to tell. The diplomatic consequences of the discoveries continued to unfold. In a historic gesture of reconciliation, Russian authorities finally granted Polish historians unrestricted access to previously sealed archives related to the Katyn Massacre. Documents that had been hidden for decades confirmed many of the details found in the recovered journals, including the existence of dissenting NKVD officers who had been purged for questioning the executions. A joint Polish-Russian historical commission was established to create a comprehensive account of the massacre and its aftermath, acknowledging the full truth after more than 80 years of denial and obfuscation. The Katyn Museum exhibition, centered around the artifacts Kasia had helped recover, became a powerful symbol of historical reckoning and the enduring human need for truth. For the Nowak family, life gradually returned to its normal rhythms. John received a promotion at his engineering firm. Maria continued teaching history, now with a more personal appreciation for the ways in which the past could reach into the present. And Kasia grew into a confident young girl whose unusual experience had left her with a mature perspective on life and death, truth and memory. On the 5th anniversary of the discoveries, a small plaque was added to the Katyn Forest Memorial, bearing the names of those whose personal effects and final writings had been recovered. At the center of the list was the name Janina Lewandowska, with an additional inscription. Her voice, once silenced, speaks again across time. Truth cannot remain buried forever. Visitors to the memorial often noticed a young girl who came regularly to place flowers beneath this plaque. A girl who, as she grew older, increasingly resembled the photographs of the young female aviator whose pioneering spirit she seemed to embody. When journalists occasionally attempted to revisit the story, asking Kasia about her childhood experiences, she would respond with a thoughtful maturity beyond her years. "I don't claim to understand what happened to me," she would say. "I only know that history isn't just words in books or artifacts in museums. It's living memory that sometimes finds new ways to be heard when justice has been denied." Janina and the other officers of Katyn deserve to have their final testimony heard. I'm grateful I could help make that possible. On her 16th birthday, Kasia took her first solo flight in a small training aircraft. As she soared above the Polish countryside, feeling the absolute freedom of the sky, she experienced a moment of perfect clarity, a sense that two journeys, separated by decades but somehow intertwined, had both reached their proper destination. In her personal journal that evening, she wrote, "Today I flew alone for the first time. The sky was endlessly blue, the earth beautiful below me. I felt completely myself, and yet I carried with me the knowledge of another woman who once experienced this same joy in a different time, not as a burden or an invasion, but as a gift, a thread connecting past and present. Well, I don't know if I'll ever fully understand what happened when I was 8 years old. Whether it was some form of reincarnation, a metaphysical connection across time, or simply a child's extraordinary empathy with a historical figure, perhaps it doesn't matter. What matters is that truth was served, justice was acknowledged, and history was made more complete. Janina's voice has been heard. Her story, and the stories of all those who died at Katyn, will not be forgotten. And I am free to write my own story now, inspired by but not defined by the past. Tomorrow I'll fly again, higher and farther. The sky belongs to me now, as once it belonged to her. Some journeys end in darkness, but others continue in light. I choose to follow the light, carrying forward the courage of those who came before me, but charting my own course through the endless blue.